Imagine stepping out to your mailbox on, just a completely ordinary Tuesday.
Right, just a normal day.
Exactly. You're shuffling through the usual stack of paper. You've got credit card offers you're definitely going to shred, maybe a coupon for that local pizza place, a utility bill.
The usual junk.
Yeah. And then you see it. It's this standard issue, very official looking envelope.
Ooh, those always make your heart skip a little.
Right. So you tear it open and your stomach just immediately drops because it has all the terrifying adrenaline spiking details printed right there in black and white.
Oh, no.
It lists your full name, your date of birth, your home address. It lists your debit card number. And then the absolute worst case scenario.
The big one.
The big one.
Yeah.
It lists your social security number, all of it, exposed and stolen in a massive ransomware attack.
Which is just a nightmare.
It really is. And look, if you are a breathing human navigating the digital age today, you have probably received some variation of this letter before.
Sadly, yes. It's almost a rite of passage at this point.
Right. But you usually expect it to be from your bank or maybe your health insurance provider or some massive retailer you shopped at recently.
Someone you actually recognize.
Exactly. But then you look at the letterhead. It doesn't name your bank at all. It names a company you have absolutely never heard of in your entire life. Marquis Software Solutions.
Which, that introduces an entirely different layer of anxiety for you.
Yes.
You are staring at this piece of paper, frantically searching your memory, thinking, wait, I have never done business with the Marquis Software Solutions.
Like, who are these people?
Right. How on earth do they have my social security number?
And that is the exact feeling we are exploring today on this deep dive.
Yeah.
So Marquis is a fintech company based in Plano, Texas. And as it turns out, your local community bank, the one you trust, pays them to handle back office operations.
You didn't choose them as a service provider.
Nope. You didn't vet their security practices. You didn't sign their terms of service.
And yet, they somehow held your most sensitive personal data. And, well, they lost it.
They lost it. But the plot twist here, and this is what makes this story truly unprecedented, is what happens next. As you dig into the news about this breach, you discover that Marquis is standing up in federal court and claiming that they shouldn't be held responsible.
Which is wild.
It is. They are pointing the finger entirely at their Firewall vendor, which is this massive network security company called SonicWall. And Marquis isn't just, pointing a finger in the press. They are actively suing SonicWall for the breach, claiming SonicWall handed the keys to the kingdom over to hackers.
So we are essentially looking at what might be the ultimate corporate game of hot potato. But the stakes are the financial identities of nearly 1 million unsuspecting people.
Yeah, real people. So let's lay out our mission for this deep dive. We are going to unpack how a single, incredibly common convenience feature on a network firewall, a feature that IT administrators enable every single day without a second thought, caused an 824,000-person data breach.
It's staggering when you put the numbers on it.
It really is. And we are going to trace how this one little feature triggered 36 different class action lawsuits and why it has just launched what legal analysts are calling the cyber liability case of the decade.
The legal ramifications alone are going to ripple for years.
Absolutely. So what are the sources guiding us through this maze today?
Well, we are synthesizing a really extensive stack of investigative reporting and legal documentation. We have technical postmortems from TechCrunch, the Hacker News, Dark Reading, and Bleeping Computer.
The heavy hitters for tech journalism?
Right, and they give us the granular, bite-by-bite breakdown of the attack itself. We are also referencing financial sector analysis from American Banker to understand the fallout for those local community banks.
Because they're the ones on the front lines with the angry customers.
Exactly. But our anchor for this entire discussion, the real foundation here, is the primary source document. We're looking at the actual federal legal complaint.
Oh, wow, the actual court filing.
Yes. That is case number 4.26CV000195, filed recently in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Texas.
Right in Marquis' backyard.
Yeah. And reading the raw legal filings is fascinating because it strips away all the polished public relations spin.
Yeah.
It reveals the stark mechanical reality of how these companies are just fighting for survival.
That makes sense. And we really need to set the stakes for you, the listener, right at the top. This isn't a Hollywood story about teenagers in a basement guessing passwords.
No.
This is a hard look at the absolute illusion we all buy into, the illusion that says, well, my vendor handles my security, so I am safe.
The blind trust.
The blind trust, exactly. We're going to examine what that blind trust actually means for your personal checking account. And if you are a business leader listening to this, what it means for the literal survival of your company.
It's an existential threat.
So let's line up the dominoes and trace this disaster back to the very first tremor. Where does this start?
Well, the chronological timeline is really the key to understanding the sheer scale of the misdirection here, because the way this incident was initially presented to the public is drastically, almost unrecognizably different from the reality that was unfolding behind the scenes.
Okay, so take us back.
We have to rewind to September 17, 2025.
Okay, September 17th. SonicWall publishes a public notice on that date. And just to establish who they are for the listener, SonicWall is a titan in the network security industry.
They're massive.
Massive. They are a firewall brand relied upon by tens of thousands of mid-market companies. We are talking school districts, law firms, healthcare clinics, and critically for our story, community banks.
Right, the backbone of local economies.
Yeah. So on September 17th, they announced they have detected suspicious activity targeting mysonicwall.com. For context, what actually is that website?
So mysonicwall.com is essentially their centralized cloud portal. When an IT administrator buys a physical SonicWall hardware appliance and installs it in their server room, they log into this cloud portal.
Okay, so it's tied to the hardware.
Yes. They go there to register the device, manage their software licenses, download firmware updates, and manage backups. It's basically the command center.
The command center. Okay, so they detect suspicious activity. But the initial narrative they put out seems incredibly downplayed, right?
Very downplayed.
They frame it as a brute force attack, and they state that it affected fewer than 5% of their customers who were using the cloud backup service.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanics here. What exactly is a brute force attack?
A brute force attack is one of the oldest and honestly most unsophisticated methods in a hacker's playbook.
Like shaking the door down.
Exactly. It involves an automated script systematically guessing thousands or millions of password combinations against a login page until it finds one that works.
Just guessing over and over.
Yeah, it is noisy, it triggers a ton of alarms, and it usually implies that the attacker lacked high-level technical skills. In the industry, we call them script kiddies. Okay, so when a massive vendor like SonicWall comes out and says, hey, we had a brute force attack on less than 5% of accounts, what they're really signaling to the market is, what? Our fundamental technology is fine.
That's exactly it. They're signaling our architecture is perfectly fine. A few of our customers just used weak passwords like password 123, and it's contained.
So they're subtly blaming the user.
That is the exact psychological framing. It shifts the blame slightly toward the user's poor password hygiene and away from the vendor's core architecture. It sounds like a contained, manageable, and frankly minor incident.
But then 3 weeks later, that entire narrative completely collapses.
It totally falls apart. The turning point is the arrival of Mandiant.
Right, and Mandiant is a big deal.
Mandiant is the premier incident response arm of Google Cloud. In the cybersecurity ecosystem, when a corporation retains Mandiant, they are essentially calling in the National Guard.
Oh, wow. So you don't just call them for a forgotten password.
Absolutely not. You do not spend Mandiant-level money to investigate a minor brute force issue on a handful of accounts. You bring them in when your internal security team is completely overwhelmed, or when executive leadership realizes the true scope of the disaster is existential.
So the executives knew this was bad. Mandiant starts digging through the digital wreckage. What do they actually find?
They conduct this incredibly deep forensic analysis. They're reviewing server logs, network traffic patterns, endpoint data, and their conclusion just shatters the September narrative.
How bad was it?
First of all, they determined it wasn't 5% of customers affected. The exposure was 100%.
Wait, 100%?
100%. Every single customer who had ever or at any point in time enabled the cloud backup feature on their firewall was compromised.
So total exposure, that is insane.
Complete exposure. Second, they revealed this wasn't a script kiddie running a password guesser. The telemetry pointed to a highly coordinated, state-sponsored actor.
A nation-state intelligence service.
Exactly. We're talking military-grade operations.
Yeah.
And finally, the method of entry wasn't brute force at all. The attackers didn't guess a single password.
Wait, they didn't guess passwords? How did they get in?
They exploited a logic vulnerability in SonicWall's API to bypass authentication entirely and just download the backup files.
Okay, I really want to pause and dig into this because this is where the technical reality gets so fascinating. We hear the term API exploit thrown around a lot in the news.
Yeah, it's a bit of a buzzword.
Right. But we established that brute force is like someone kicking a door repeatedly to see if the lock breaks. How does an API exploit operate differently in this scenario?
Let's visualize an API. It stands for Application Programming Interface. Think of it as the drive-through window at a bank.
Okay, a drive-through.
You don't walk into the vault yourself. You pull up to the window, you hand the teller a specific form of identification, you make a very specific formatted request, and the teller goes and gets your money for you.
Right.
An API is how software applications talk to each other in a structured way.
So my SonicWall.com has an API that handles the backup files.
Correct. When a customer's firewall wants to save its settings, it talks to this API. In a normal, secure scenario, the API requires a digital authentication token, basically a complex cryptographic proof of identity, before it will accept or hand over any files.
So it checks your ID.
Yes. Now, an API exploit happens when there is a flaw in the underlying code of that drive-through window.
What kind of flaw are we talking about?
In this specific case, the legal complaint points to a code change SonicWall made to their API in February of 2025.
Oh, so it was a recent update.
Yeah. And it appears this routine update inadvertently created an authentication bypass.
How does that work with the drive-through analogy?
It's as if the bank teller was accidentally programmed to accept a blank piece of paper instead of a verified ID, as long as the person at the window asked for the files using a very specific undocumented phrase.
Oh, wow. So if you know the secret phrase, you just get the files.
Exactly. The nation-state actors discovered this flaw. They didn't kick the door in, they just drove up to the window, used the exact technical syntax that bypassed the ID check, and asked the automated system to kindly hand over every single backup file in the repository.
And the system just handed them over?
The system, following its newly flawed logic, complied. It was silent, it was structured, and it was entirely authorized by the broken code.
That is terrifying. I am stuck on the timeline here, though. SonicWall comes out in September saying, hey, we had a minor password issue on a few accounts.
Right.
3 weeks later, Mandiant reveals, actually, a foreign intelligence syndicate exploited a core logic flaw to steal the keys to tens of thousands of global networks. I just have to ask, is it normal for a multi-million-dollar tech enterprise to be this catastrophically wrong in their initial public assessment? Or does this highlight a deeper systemic issue with how companies self-diagnose during a crisis?
It absolutely reveals a massive, deeply ingrained flaw in corporate incident response. Well, when a breach first triggers alarms, the initial indicators are usually very fragmentary. An engineer might notice a slight anomaly in some database queries, or maybe a brief spike in outbound bandwidth.
Just a blip.
Just a blip. And companies are under immense pressure, both from a public relations standpoint and from regulatory frameworks like the SEC, to report incidents quickly.
Right, the SEC mandates fast reporting now.
They do. But these companies are also terrified of causing unnecessary panic or triggering a massive stock sell-off before they have all the facts.
So they report the absolute bare minimum they can legally justify at that moment.
Exactly. They report the minimum verifiable facts they have at hour 48, but they frame those limited facts as the totality of the event.
It's like finding smoke and saying, oh, someone burnt toast, without checking the rest of the house.
That's a great way to put it. It is a profound failure of imagination. Instead of assuming the worst-case scenario and working backward, they assume the best-case scenario that fits the anomalous data.
And it takes weeks for Mandiant to reconstruct the real crime scene.
Yes. And by the time the real truth emerges, it is invariably so much worse than the initial disclosure.
Wow. That gap, that huge chasm between what they claimed in September and what was revealed in October, seems like it's going to be a massive legal problem for them. But let's look at the actual loot. The scale of the theft is just breathtaking. Every customer who ever clicked backup.
Everyone.
But the sheer volume of files isn't what makes this a nightmare. It's the nature of what is inside those files. Which brings us to what I want to call the Trojan horse of convenience. What exactly is a configuration file, and why does this cloud backup feature even exist in the first place?
To understand why the feature exists, you have to understand the grueling reality of IT administration.
Okay, met the scene.
Let's say you are the lead network engineer for a mid-sized credit union. It is 11:30 p.m. on the Friday of a holiday weekend.
The worst possible time.
The worst. Your primary physical firewall hardware experiences a catastrophic failure. A power surge fries the motherboard. Suddenly, your entire bank's network is offline. No remote workers can connect. No internal transactions can route securely. The whole system is dark.
Panic mode.
Complete panic mode. If you do not have a backup of your configuration, you have to drive to the data center, unbox a brand new piece of hardware, and spend the next 20 hours manually typing in thousands of complex network routing rules, security policies, and cryptographic keys.
From memory.
From memory or from, outdated Excel spreadsheets sitting on a secure drive somewhere.
Which sounds like an absolute nightmare scenario that would lead to immediate burnout for any IT professional.
It is the exact scenario that keeps IT directors awake at night. So to solve this, firewall manufacturers introduced the cloud backup feature.
Just a convenience thing.
Right. It is a single, elegant checkbox in the management dashboard. When enabled, every time an administrator makes a change to the network rules, the firewall takes a snapshot of its entire brain, the configuration file, and silently uploads it to SonicWall's cloud for safekeeping.
So it's automatic.
Automatic and invisible. If that box dies on a Friday night, the engineer plugs a new one in, clicks Restore from Cloud, and within 2 minutes, the entire corporate network is running exactly as it was.
Okay, I can see why people use it. It is a brilliant, powerful convenience feature.
It really is.
But the convenience is the trap here. Let's break down the anatomy of what is actually inside that file. Because when I think of a backup, I think of my smartphone saving my photos and my alarm clock settings to iCloud.
Right, very benign stuff.
Exactly. A firewall configuration file is entirely different, isn't it?
Completely different. If you open a firewall configuration file and possess the technical knowledge to read its syntax, you are looking at the comprehensive, foundational architectural blueprint of that entire organization.
The blueprint.
It contains the deepest secrets of the network. To start, it holds the pre-shared keys for all virtual private network or VPN tunnels.
Okay, let's make sure that concept is perfectly clear for everyone. Explain what a VPN tunnel is and what a pre-shared key does in a corporate environment.
Sure. A site-to-site VPN tunnel is essentially an invisible, heavily encrypted pipe that connects two physically separate locations over the public internet.
Okay, so like a private highway between two buildings.
Exactly. It's how a small branch office of a bank securely talks to the main headquarters. To build that pipe, both a firewall at the branch and the firewall at headquarters need to cryptographically prove they trust each other.
Like a secret handshake.
Right. And they do this using a pre-shared key. It's a massively long, randomized string of characters that acts as a mutual password.
And what happens if someone steals that key?
If an external attacker acquires that key, they can theoretically build their own invisible pipe directly into the heart of the bank's network.
And that master key is just sitting in this backup file in the cloud?
It's just sitting there.
What else is in there?
It contains the administrator usernames and typically the cryptographic hashes of their passwords. It contains SNMP community strings.
Okay, I want to stop you right there because we see acronyms like SNMP constantly in these technical reports. What is that actually doing on a network?
Good question. SNMP stands for Simple Network Management Protocol. Large networks have monitoring software that constantly checks the health of servers and routers.
Like checking the pulse of the system.
Exactly. It asks things like, is your CPU running too hot? Or is your hard drive full? To ask those questions, the monitoring software needs a password to access the device. That password is the SNMP community string.
So if a hacker gets that string.
If a hacker has that string, they can map out the internal health and structure of every single device on the network. They know exactly what servers you have and what operating systems they run.
Okay, so they have the VPN keys to get in and the SNMP strings to look around. What else?
The file also contains LDAP or radios bind credentials.
More acronyms.
I know, bear with me. These are perhaps the most critical. LDAP is the protocol used to communicate with Active Directory.
And what is Active Directory?
You can think of Active Directory as the master phone book, the bouncer, and the supreme authority of a corporate network all rolled into one. It dictates exactly who is allowed to log into what computer and access which files.
So it's the absolute core of network permissions. To ask the bouncer a question, the firewall needs a specific credential.
Yes. The firewall uses a bind credential, which is a highly privileged service account, to query Active Directory. And the configuration file stores that credential.
Oh my God.
So by stealing this one file, the attacker obtains the keys to build a tunnel into the network, the credentials to read the health of the servers, and the master account needed to interrogate the supreme bouncer of the entire system.
And beyond the passwords, it gives them the map, right?
A literal granular map. The file explicitly lists every internal IP address, every subnet, and the exact rules detailing which servers are allowed to communicate with the outside world. It maps out the DMZ, the demilitarized zone where public-facing web servers sit.
Let's try to ground this in physical reality for a second. We are talking about the firewall, which is marketed as this impenetrable military-grade titanium vault door protecting a bank.
Right.
But enabling this cloud backup feature, it is the equivalent of the bank manager taking the master architectural blueprints, which show the exact location of the motion sensors, the thickness of the vault walls, the blind spots in the cameras.
Writing the combination to the vault right on the margin of the blueprint.
Exactly. And then handing it to the company that manufactured the door to hold onto for safekeeping.
That captures the vulnerability perfectly.
Yeah.
In the intelligence community and cybersecurity sector, the theft of this specific type of data is referred to as pre-positioning.
Pre-positioning.
Yes. When a nation-state actor executed this API exploit in February of 2025, their immediate goal wasn't to deploy ransomware and demand a quick payout. They were playing a much longer strategic game.
Gathering intel.
Exactly. They were stockpiling architectural blueprints of global infrastructure. Because when you possess the blueprint and the combination code, you don't need to act like a noisy burglar breaking windows. You simply unlock the front door and walk in whenever you want.
I am struggling with the human element of this, though. I interact with IT professionals regularly. These are individuals whose entire careers are built on a foundation of intense professional paranoia.
They're very paranoid people by trade.
Right. They obsess over segmenting networks, they run aggressive penetration tests, they mandate complex passwords that change every 30 days. Why would these highly trained, deeply paranoid professionals willingly hand the literal keys to their kingdom over to a third-party vendor's cloud? Is the industry just fundamentally addicted to convenience?
It is a systemic reliance on convenience, definitely, but it is deeply rooted in stark business realities. The vast majority of IT departments, especially in mid-market sectors like community banking or healthcare, are chronically underfunded and severely understaffed.
So they're just doing the best they can.
They are constantly fighting fires. When a multi-billion-dollar vendor offers to manage the risk of storing this critical backup, basically promising that it will allow the engineer to go home to their family at 6 o'clock instead of midnight during a crisis, the engineer takes that deal.
They trust the brand.
Yes. The underlying assumption is that the massive vendor, with its dedicated security operations center and infinite budget, can protect that file much better than the small, exhausted local IT team ever could.
But this event shatters that assumption.
Tragically, yes.
Uh-huh.
What the Marquis incident proves is that this assumption is a fatal logic flaw.
So the state-sponsored attackers successfully pull off this massive API heist. They are sitting on a mountain of titanium vault blueprints, but they don't just hoard them in a digital basement indefinitely. They begin to weaponize them.
They put them to work.
And this brings us to the specific fintech company that found itself directly in the crosshairs, Marquis Software Solutions. Let's look at how the dominoes actually fell.
The timeline of the weaponization phase is crucial here. The forensic sources outline a very specific sequence of events. The vulnerability in the SonicWall API was introduced via that code update in February of 2025.
Right, the drive-through flaw.
Sometime between that February update and the late summer, the state-sponsored actors systematically drained the cloud backup repositories. They acquired the configuration files.
But the public didn't know about this until September 17.
Exactly. The public and SonicWall's customers were completely in the dark. The threat actors used that window of ignorance. In August of 2025, a full month before SonicWall even published their minimized brute force notice, the attackers put the stolen configurations to work. They targeted Marquis.
Wait, I have a massive question about that timeline. If the attackers stole these files in the spring, why wait until August to attack Marquis? I mean, if you have the master keys to a bank, why wait 3 or 4 months to rob it?
That delay is the hallmark of a really sophisticated state-sponsored operation. Imagine stealing 50,000 different architectural blueprints in one night.
It's overwhelming.
You cannot attack 50,000 targets simultaneously without drawing the immediate, overwhelming attention of global intelligence agencies and military cyber commands.
You'd light up the sky.
You'd be caught instantly. You have to sort through the loot. The attackers likely spent months parsing the configuration files, identifying which files belonged to high-value targets.
Sorting the gold from the gravel.
Right. They were looking for financial aggregators, government contractors, critical infrastructure. They identified Marquis, analyzed their specific network map, and carefully planned a bespoke attack path that would guarantee maximum impact.
So by the time August rolls around, they are ready to strike. They execute the attack on Marquis. But because they have the config file, they don't need to, send a phishing email hoping some employee clicks a bad link, right?
There was no need for social engineering. None. They simply approached the perimeter and walked in.
Unbelievable.
They leveraged the exact cryptographic keys and routing rules they had extracted from the SonicWall cloud. From the perspective of Marquis' Firewall, it was receiving a perfectly valid mathematical handshake from an authorized device.
So the firewall is just like, welcome back.
The firewall had no logical reason to block the traffic. It allowed the attackers deep into the network.
And once they were inside, the devastation was absolute.
Absolute. They executed a classic, devastating double extortion ransomware playbook.
Double extortion?
Yeah, they moved laterally through the network,
Yeah.
likely using those LDAP bind credentials we talked about to escalate their privileges. They deployed encryption malware to paralyze Marquis' internal systems, and simultaneously they exfiltrated massive databases of sensitive information.
So they lock you out and they steal the data to blackmail you.
Exactly. Double extortion.
The scale of that exfiltration is horrifying. When the dust started to settle, Marquis had to begin notifying victims. By March of 2026, they announced that roughly 672,000 individuals were compromised.
A huge number.
But then, just weeks later, in April 2026, the investigation deepened, and that toll skyrocketed to 824,000 individuals. And this wasn't just Marquis' own employees, right?
No, the blast radius expanded exponentially because Marquis is a business-to-business entity. They provide essential software and data processing services to financial institutions.
Ah, so the banks gave Marquis the data.
Right. When Marquis' defenses failed, the impact cascaded down to the consumers of 80 different independent community banks and credit unions that relied on Marquis.
80 banks.
The Texas Attorney General's data breach portal indicated that over 400,000 of those victims resided in Texas alone.
And we have to emphasize the severity of the data that was taken. We are not talking about a leaked newsletter list with some email addresses and first names.
No, this is the worst-case scenario.
This was the holy grail of identity theft.
Yeah.
The databases contain social security numbers, dates of birth, full financial routing details, debit and credit card numbers, and physical home addresses.
Everything you need.
If a criminal syndicate acquires this specific package of data on the dark web, they can open fraudulent mortgages in a victim's name. They can take out massive loans. They can systematically dismantle a person's financial life for a decade.
It ruins life.
And all of it happened because a firewall couldn't distinguish between a malicious actor and a legitimate administrator simply because the actor held a stolen digital key.
Which brings us to one of the most frustrating, intensely debated technical elements of this entire catastrophe.
What's that?
The failure of multi-factor authentication, or MFA.
I am so glad we were talking about this, because in every single corporate security training and every IP seminar I've ever seen, the absolute golden rule is always turn on MFA.
It's gospel.
The idea is that even if someone steals your password, they can't log in unless they also have the little 6-digit code sent to your physical phone.
Yeah.
So did Marquis just forget to turn on MFA? Was that their big mistake?
They did not forget. The documentation shows that Marquis had multi-factor authentication fully enabled on their virtual private network.
Right, they had it on.
They were following industry best practices. In a standard attack scenario, if a hacker manages to guess or phish an employee's password and attempts to log into the remote portal, the MFA system intervenes.
It stops them cold.
It blocks access until the employee approves a prompt on their smartphone. But in this specific pre-positioning scenario, the MFA infrastructure was rendered entirely irrelevant.
I don't understand. How is that possible? If the system demands a second factor, how does a stolen config file bypass it?
It comes down to the fundamental difference between user-level authentication and machine-to-machine authentication.
Okay, unpack that.
MFA is designed to verify human users. But the attackers didn't steal a human user's password. They stole the foundational pre-shared keys used to establish the underlying VPN tunnels themselves.
The invisible pipes.
Right. When a remote router or software client presents the correct pre-shared cryptographic key to build a site-to-site tunnel, the firewall's core logic dictates that this connection is inherently trusted at a foundational hardware level.
It doesn't even think to ask for a text message.
Exactly. The system assumes, hey, this is another trusted server talking to me, not a human typing on a keyboard. Therefore, it bypasses the user-level MFA prompts entirely.
Wow. So, if we look at this through a physical lens, it is as if Marquis spent millions of dollars installing a state-of-the-art retinal scanner on the massive front doors of their corporate headquarters.
Right, highly secure.
And the security team is patting themselves on the back, confident that absolutely no human being is getting through that lobby without a retina scan. But the burglar doesn't even walk toward the lobby.
Not at all.
The burglar looks at the stolen blueprints, locates an automated hidden service elevator in the underground loading dock, an elevator designed solely for authorized delivery robots that open it with a master magnetic key.
A machine-to-machine entrant.
Exactly. The burglar uses the stolen magnetic key, steps into the elevator, and bypasses the retinal scanner completely.
The architecture of network defense is built on assumed layers of trust. If an adversary possesses the foundational blueprint, they do not engage your secondary security systems. They simply identify the pathways designed for frictionless, automated trust, and they route around the alarms.
This raises a terrifying question for anyone listening who manages a network or, relies on one. If possessing the vendor's blueprint allows an attacker to completely bypass our secondary alarms like MFA, does the traditional model of network defense even function anymore? Are companies just pouring money into building taller castle walls while inadvertently handing out detailed maps of the secret underground tunnels?
The Marquis breach is the definitive proof that the traditional perimeter defense model is fundamentally compromised if the integrity of that perimeter relies on a third-party cloud.
It's dead.
You can invest millions in a towering, impenetrable wall, but if your security contractor leaves the override codes on a public server, the height of your wall offers zero protection. It demands a radical rethinking of how trust is validated inside a network.
And the realization of that failure, the realization that the wall was rendered useless because a vendor lost the blueprint, is why Marquis is currently facing the absolute wrath of nearly 1 million terrified consumers and 80 furious bank CEOs.
They are under immense pressure.
But Marquis is taking a highly unusual path here. They are not just issuing the standard corporate apologies, offering a year of free credit monitoring, and quietly absorbing the financial devastation.
No, they are fighting back hard.
They are fighting for their corporate existence. They are launching an unprecedented legal counteroffensive to survive the blast radius, and that brings us to the lawsuit.
Yes. On February 23, 2026, Marquis officially filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Texas. This is case number 4.26 CVD-00195, and it is a landmark moment in cyber law.
I really encourage listeners who are interested in the intersection of law and technology to look up that case number. The filings are absolutely fascinating. What exactly are the legal charges Marquis is bringing against SonicWall?
The formal complaint lists a battery of really heavy civil charges: negligence, gross negligence, unjust enrichment, misrepresentation, contribution, and indemnity.
Let's translate the legal terminology into practical reality. Negligence is failing to take proper care. But gross negligence is a much higher bar, isn't it?
Much higher. Gross negligence implies that SonicWall didn't merely make a minor coding error. It alleges they acted with a conscious, voluntary disregard for the need to use reasonable care, and that this reckless disregard directly caused grave, foreseeable injury to Marquis and his clients.
It's saying they knew better and didn't care. And what about the charge of misrepresentation? Does that tie back to the timeline gap we discussed earlier?
It connects directly to the September 17 disclosure. Marquis is arguing that SonicWall knew, or reasonably should have known, the catastrophic severity of the API vulnerability in September.
They knew it wasn't just a brute force attack.
Right. By publicly downplaying the event as a minor brute force issue affecting a tiny fraction of users, SonicWall materially misrepresented the risk. This prevented Marquis from taking emergency defensive actions that might have mitigated the damage.
They were essentially lulled into a false sense of security while the hackers were already inside their network in August.
Exactly.
But the most financially critical terms in this lawsuit are contribution and indemnity. What do those mean for the future of Marquis as a business?
To understand those terms, you have to look at the pressure Marquis is under. They are currently defending more than 36 separate class action lawsuits filed on behalf of the 824,000 consumers whose identities were stolen.
36 class actions?
Furthermore, they are facing a complex trade secrets case. The sheer financial weight of 36 class actions, the exorbitant costs of forensic remediation, the armies of lawyers, and the mandate to purchase credit monitoring for nearly 1 million people.
It's staggering.
It is an economic burden that would bankrupt almost any mid-sized enterprise. By claiming contribution and indemnity, Marquis is legally stating to the court, look, we are facing catastrophic financial liabilities to these victims, but the root cause, was not our failure. We demand that SonicWall be forced to foot the entirety of this bill.
They want SonicWall to pay for the credit monitoring, the legal settlements, the forensic teams, everything.
Every penny.
The core argument is summarized in a specific quote from the filing that legal scholars are already debating. It reads, "The threat actor that attacked Marquis was able to circumvent our firewall by leveraging the configuration data extracted from the service provider's cloud backup breach."
That's a powerful statement.
In plain, non-legal terms, Marquis is saying, "We locked our doors. You sold copies of our master keys to an international syndicate."
That is exactly it. And the historical context here is what makes this lawsuit so monumental.
Why is it so historic?
Since the dawn of the commercial software industry in the 1980s and 90s, vendors have been heavily insulated from this exact type of financial ruin. When a company purchases enterprise software or network hardware, they are required to agree to an end-user license agreement, commonly known as the EULA.
The EULA, the massive wall of text that everyone just scrolls past and clicks accept.
Exactly that text. And buried deep within the legal boilerplate of every single EULA are ironclad liability caps and mandatory arbitration clauses.
What do those do?
They essentially dictate that the software is provided as is. The contract explicitly states, if our software contains a flaw that destroys your database or ruins your business, the maximum financial penalty we owe you is a refund of the original software license fee.
Wait, what? So, to put real numbers on that, if a company buys a firewall for $5,000 and a vulnerability in that firewall leads to a ransomware attack that costs the company $50 million in damages.
The EULA contract legally dictates that the vendor only owes them a $5,000 refund.
That is absurd.
That has been the foundational legal shield of the entire software industry for decades. It is the as-is liability shield. If Marquis manages to survive SonicWall's inevitable legal motions to dismiss the case, if this actually goes to trial and a jury finds in favor of Marquis, it will fundamentally rewrite how the judicial system treats cybersecurity vendor liability for the next generation.
It would set a massive precedent.
It would prove that EULA liability caps do not protect vendors if gross negligence or deceptive misrepresentation can be proven regarding a supply chain breach.
I always try to frame this bizarre legal reality against the physical world. If you purchase a brand new vehicle and you are driving down the interstate at 70 miles per hour, and the brakes suddenly fail due to a known manufacturing defect in the brake line, resulting in a horrific crash.
Right.
The manufacturer doesn't point to a piece of paper in the glove box and say, "Oh, sorry, you accepted the car as is. Here's a refund for the brake mods."
No, they'd be sued into oblivion.
You sue the manufacturer for the catastrophic damages their defective product caused. But in the technology sector, we have collectively accepted this paradigm of we are not responsible for the consequences of our own code, as if it's an unchangeable law of nature.
It's wild when you think about it.
Could this single lawsuit actually kill the as-is era of tech contracts?
It is the existential debate happening in boardrooms across Silicon Valley right now. If software vendors and cloud providers are suddenly held strictly liable for the downstream financial damages caused by vulnerabilities in their code or breaches of their infrastructure, the entire economic model of the industry shifts.
How so?
Well, the cost of software licenses would skyrocket to cover the astronomical new cyber insurance premiums the vendors would have to carry.
Oh, because they'd have to insure against billion-dollar payouts.
Exactly. But the counterargument is equally compelling. If vendors are never held financially liable for the damage their flaws cause, there is zero market incentive for them to prioritize rigorous security testing over rushing new buggy features to market.
It's a perverse incentive.
This lawsuit is the ultimate pressure test of that break-in paradigm.
And what becomes terrifying is that this intense legal battle in Texas is not just an isolated, localized dispute between one fintech firm and one hardware vendor. It serves as the loudest, most urgent alarm bell for a massive structural shift in how our modern digital economy is wired. We have to zoom out and examine the broader crisis here. We are talking about the nth-party supply chain vulnerability.
This concept is the defining cybersecurity challenge of our era.
Define it for us.
For the past 20 years, the entire philosophy of network defense has been heavily focused on securing the perimeter. You build a deep digital moat around your corporate castle. You install advanced firewalls, you train your employees relentlessly to recognize phishing emails, you deploy behavioral antivirus on every laptop.
The castle doctrine.
Right. The underlying belief was that if you control and monitor your own perimeter, you are safe.
But the perimeter doesn't exist where we think it does anymore.
The perimeter has completely dissolved. The edge of your network is no longer the physical walls of your office or your data center. The perimeter is now the edge of your vendor's network. And further down the chain, it is the edge of your vendor's network. That is the definition of nth-party risk.
Let's trace the chain for the Marquis victims to really illustrate this.
Okay, you are an individual consumer who opens a checking account at a local community bank. You trust the bank.
Right.
The bank, the first party, hires Marquis, a third party, to process your data. Marquis purchases a firewall from SonicWall, fourth party, to secure their network. SonicWall hosts the configuration backups on a massive cloud provider like Google Cloud or AWS. That's a fifth party.
So you're 5 layers deep.
Yes. If a logic flaw exists at the fifth party level, the chain collapses, and the individual consumer at the beginning of the chain loses their identity.
And the sources highlight that this isn't some hypothetical theory. This exact pattern is the defining trend of the 2020s. We watched it happen with the SolarWinds supply chain attack in 2020, where malicious code was injected into IT monitoring software used by the federal government.
A massive wake-up call.
We saw it with the movie file transfer breach in 2023, which compromised thousands of organizations simultaneously. We saw it with the Snowflake cloud storage attacks in 2024, and now the SonicWall API breach in 2025 and 2026.
The underlying mechanics of every single one of those historic, catastrophic breaches are identical.
Identical.
One centralized vendor manages to convince thousands of independent organizations to trust them with a highly privileged piece of data or administrative access. That single centralized vendor suffers a breach. Instantly, without any warning, every downstream customer inherits the massive blast radius.
It creates a single point of failure for the entire global digital economy.
It really does.
It is as if we have constructed a modern society that functions like a sprawling, continent-wide electrical grid. Millions of individual homes and businesses are wired in. The homeowners spend fortunes buying the best surge protectors and upgrading the wiring inside their own walls, feeling incredibly secure.
Right, they've done their part.
But they all rely on one massive central substation, and when the engineers at the substation accidentally leave the control room doors open and the grid goes down, it doesn't matter how good the wiring in your specific house is, you're still sitting in the dark.
The grid analogy is highly accurate because it emphasizes the lack of individual control. And the ripple effects of this realization are beginning to reshape the regulatory landscape.
How are the regulators responding?
Federal regulators, particularly the Federal Trade Commission and various state attorneys general, are waking up to this systemic risk. They are signaling that they will begin aggressively prosecuting vendors who misstate the scope of their breaches, just as SonicWall is accused of doing in the Marquis lawsuit.
So the government is getting involved.
Big time. But the most immediate, brutal impact will be felt in the cyber insurance markets.
Because the insurance industry is the entity actually paying out these massive ransomware settlements, how are they reacting?
The insurance markets are fundamentally altering their underwriting processes. When a company applies to renew their cyber liability policy this year, the questionnaires are going to look entirely different.
Like what?
The underwriters are no longer satisfied with asking, hey, do you have a firewall installed? They're going to ask highly specific, aggressive questions. Does any critical third-party vendor store your network configuration data in their cloud infrastructure?
Wow.
If the company answers yes, their premiums will either multiply exponentially or they may be denied coverage entirely. The insurance actuaries have realized they simply cannot underwrite the aggregated, cascading risk of these centralized single points of failure.
I have to challenge the logical conclusion of all this because it feels incredibly bleak. If every cloud vendor is a potential single point of failure that bypasses all our defenses, is the solution for businesses to panic, rip out their cloud integrations, and start pulling everything back in-house?
Like a mass retreat.
Exactly. Are we supposed to regress to the 1990s, build our own physical server rooms, and refuse to integrate with external partners? Or is this nth-party risk simply an unsolvable, permanent reality of doing business in 2026?
Well, retreating completely to on-premise infrastructure is neither financially viable nor logistically possible for the vast majority of modern businesses. The sheer technical expertise required to maintain and secure a complex, isolated server environment 24/7 is prohibitive.
Most companies just can't do it.
They can't. Therefore, nth-party risk is a permanent structural reality of the modern economy. But it is not unsolvable. It is manageable.
How do you manage it?
Managing it requires a foundational shift away from blind trust toward what the industry calls zero-trust architecture. It requires a rigorous, almost adversarial approach to how an organization manages its vendors. You can no longer assume a vendor is secure simply because their logo is universally recognized or their marketing materials claim they use military-grade encryption.
Acknowledging this vast, interconnected web of invisible risk can definitely induce a sense of paralysis. I mean, if you are listening to this, you might be feeling the urge to unplug your router, move to a cabin in the woods, and bury your life savings in a coffee can.
I get that urge.
But the goal of this deep dive is to give you agency and actionable intelligence. We are going to break down a concrete action plan for reclaiming your secrets, whether you are the IT administrator managing the network, the executive running the company, or the consumer whose data was just compromised. Let's start with the frontline defenders.
For the IT administrators listening, the Marquis incident provides a stark, unforgiving roadmap of what you must do immediately.
What's step one?
First, you must operate under the assumption that your configuration files have already been compromised if they've ever touched a vendor's cloud environment. You need to execute a complete rotation of all firewall configurations.
We mentioned rotation earlier, but let's be really specific about what that entails.
It means generating brand new pre-shared keys for every single VPN tunnel you operate. It means forcing password resets for all administrator accounts, generating new SNMP community strings for your monitoring tools, and crucially, creating new LDAP bind credentials for your Active Directory integration.
Which sounds like a massive weekend-ruining headache.
It is awful, but it is the only way to mathematically sever the stolen keys. If you don't rotate them, the attackers still have the master key.
Okay, what's step two?
Second, you must log into your vendor portals today and completely disable the cloud backup feature for security appliances. Delete any existing archives stored on their servers.
Is there absolutely any safe way to maintain a cloud backup for disaster recovery? Because we talked about how bad Friday night crashes are.
The only technically sound exception is if the vendor provides verified, mathematically proven end-to-end encryption, where you, the customer, hold the sole decryption key on your own local hardware.
So the vendor can't read it.
Right. If the vendor's engineers or their automated systems can read the unencrypted file while it sits in their cloud, it means whoever breaches the vendor can read the file. It is a binary reality.
What about the MFA issue? We just spent considerable time detailing how MFA completely failed to protect Marquis from this specific pre-positioning attack. Should IT admins just abandon MFA as a failed experiment?
Absolutely not. That would be a catastrophic overreaction.
Though.
You must enforce strict multi-factor authentication on every single administrative interface and remote access point. Yes, the attackers bypassed it at Marquis because they possess the foundational machine-level pre-shared keys. But MFA remains the single most effective defense against the vast majority of daily attacks, credential stuffing, phishing campaigns, basic password guessing.
It stops the everyday stuff.
Exactly. It is an indispensable layer of defense, even if we now understand it is not an invincible silver bullet against nation-states.
And regarding the configuration rules themselves, how often should teams be auditing the actual maps they create?
Quarterly, rigorous audits of firewall rules and service accounts are now mandatory. The logic here is damage limitation.
How so?
If your configuration file eventually leaks, and you should assume it might, you want it to reveal the absolute minimum usable footprint to the attacker. Prune any exposed services that are no longer strictly necessary. Delete stale or legacy firewall rules. Remove orphaned administrative accounts belonging to employees who left the company years ago. Shrink the target area.
Keep the map as small as possible.
Exactly. Finally, IT admins must demand radical transparency from their vendors. Submit 3 specific questions to your account representatives in writing.
What are the questions?
1. Is my data encrypted at rest exclusively with a key I control? 2. What is the exact geographic location where this data is stored? And 3. What is your contractually legally obligated timeline for notifying me in the event of a breach?
Get those answers in writing, not just on a sales call. Okay, moving up the corporate ladder. What if you are a business executive, a CEO, a CFO, or a member of the board of directors who doesn't necessarily know how to configure a router, but is responsible for the survival of the business?
Your primary responsibility in this new paradigm is legal and compliance defense. You must instruct your general counsel to review your vendor liability clauses immediately.
Look at the EULAs.
Yes. The Marquis lawsuit should serve as a blaring siren for your legal team. You need to understand precisely who bears the financial burden if a third-party vendor loses your data or exposes your network.
And executives need to stop accepting vague reassurances, right?
The era of accepting marketing fluff is over. When a vendor's glossy brochure states, "We take your security seriously," that phrase holds zero legal weight.
It's just PR.
Executives must require rigorous documentation, specifically SOC2 Type 2 reports and attestations of independent third-party penetration tests. And crucially, do not merely ask for these documents as a professional courtesy during the sales pitch. Your legal team must encode the maintenance of these security standards as strict, enforceable contractual rights.
Give it some teeth.
Exactly. If a vendor fails to maintain their SOC2 compliance, it should constitute an immediate breach of contract, allowing you to terminate the relationship without penalty.
All right, let's bring this down to the individual level. The consumer, the person who started this deep dive by opening that horrifying letter from Marquis. The bleak reality of the nth-party crisis is that the consumer is the ultimate victim, yet possesses the least amount of systemic power to change the architecture.
It's incredibly unfair.
It is. If your community bank contracts Marquis, and Marquis relies on SonicWall, you had absolutely zero voice in any of those decisions. But your social security number is the one being auctioned on the dark web. So how can an individual listener proactively defend themselves in an economy that practically forces them to share their personal data with hundreds of vulnerable third, fourth, and fifth parties they've never even heard of?
The foundational rule of the modern digital economy that every consumer must internalize is this: convenience is almost always subsidized by someone who is monetizing your risk.
That's a heavy thought.
It's true. A free cloud backup feature for an enterprise or a frictionless save my credit card for later button for a consumer represents a trade-off. It takes a highly sensitive asset and stores it in a centralized repository where an adversary can eventually reach it. For consumers, the strategy must shift from preventing the breach, which is impossible for an individual, to aggressively minimizing the damage when the breach inevitably occurs.
So, step one for the listener today. Check the Texas Attorney General's data breach portal or the equivalent consumer protection website in your specific state. Search the database to see if your local bank or credit union is listed as an affected client in the Marquis incident.
Yes, find out if you're exposed. Step 2 is the single most critical piece of actionable advice we can offer in this entire discussion. You must freeze your credit.
Freeze it.
Do not wait for a breach notification letter to arrive in the mail. Be proactive. Go to the websites of all three major credit reporting bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and place a security freeze on your file.
Is it hard to do?
Not at all. The process takes roughly 10 minutes. It is mandated by federal law to be completely free, and it is the only effective mechanism to stop a criminal from opening new lines of credit, mortgages, or auto loans in your name.
Even if they have your SSN?
Even if they possess your stolen Social Security number and date of birth, if the credit is frozen, they get blocked.
I want to ask about the credit monitoring services. When you get the breach letter, it almost always includes a code for 1 year of free Experian Identity Works or a similar service. It feels like a meager Band-Aid. Should consumers even bother signing up for it?
You should accept the free service, yes. It provides a layer of visibility. However, it is vital to understand the psychological trap of credit monitoring. You must treat credit monitoring purely as a rearview mirror.
A rearview mirror. Explain that.
Credit monitoring only sends you an alert to inform you that a criminal already opened a fraudulent credit card in your name yesterday. It is the smoke detector that only goes off after the kitchen is already burned to the foundation.
Ah, so the damage is done.
Exactly. A credit freeze, on the other hand, is the deadbolt lock on the front door that mathematically prevents the criminal from opening the account in the first place.
That is a huge distinction.
Additionally, consumers should utilize the tools provided by their banks. Turn on push notifications and transaction alerts for every single credit and debit card you own. Configure your phone to buzz every time a single dollar is spent.
It is a sobering reality, but taking those steps provides the only real armor we have in this environment. We are bringing this deep dive to a close. Let's take a moment to recap the sheer, staggering scale of the disaster we've unpacked today. We started with what seemed like a mundane, routine network management feature, a simple cloud backup checkbox that IT administrators clicked to save themselves from a weekend emergency.
Just a little chatbot.
And that single convenience feature, intersecting with a flawed API code update introduced in February of 2025, resulted in the silent, systematic theft of foundational network blueprints by a sophisticated state-sponsored intelligence apparatus.
A total hype.
Those stolen blueprints were then hoarded, analyzed, and eventually weaponized against high-value targets like Marquis software solutions. The attackers completely bypassed Marquis' multi-factor authentication defenses because they possessed the machine-level trust keys, leading to the devastating exfiltration of highly sensitive financial and personal data belonging to 824,000 individuals across 80 independent community banks,
It's hard to wrap your head around the scale.
which subsequently triggered 36 separate class action lawsuits, a massive corporate trade secrets dispute, and a landmark federal lawsuit in the Eastern District of Texas that possesses the legal momentum to potentially shatter the software industry's decades-old as is liability shield forever,
It could change everything.
all stemming from one seemingly harmless checkbox. It is the ultimate manifestation of the butterfly effect in the realm of cyber warfare. So, as we wrap up our analysis, we want to leave you with a final, broader concept to mull over:
The concept I encourage listeners to deeply consider is what I call the data half-life.
the data half-life.
Right. In the physical sciences, a half-life measures the time it takes for a radioactive substance to decay and lose half of its dangerous radioactivity. But in the realm of cybersecurity, digital secrets do not decay.
They stay potent.
If a firewall configuration file, backed up to a vendor's cloud server 3 years ago, can still be perfectly weaponized to bypass defenses and destroy a company today, the half-life of stolen digital secrets is effectively infinite. The data remains perpetually radioactive.
Wow.
This raises a profoundly uncomfortable question for all of us. What forgotten digital conveniences from your own past, an old router configuration backup, an abandoned cloud storage folder you haven't checked since 2019, a legacy password manager you forgot to delete, are quietly sitting in a compromised vendor's server right now, waiting to be discovered and weaponized?
So they're ticking.
Have we reached a tipping point in our technological evolution, where the pursuit of digital convenience is mathematically and fundamentally incompatible with long-term security?
That is a deeply chilling thought to leave on, but it is the unvarnished reality of navigating the nth-party world we have built. If you take absolutely nothing else away from our deep dive today, please take 10 minutes to go freeze your credit at the 3 major bureaus. Start aggressively questioning the vendors you trust with your business, demand that your legal teams read the fine print in those software contracts, and never, ever assume that just because you installed a state-of-the-art retinal scanner on the front lobby door, the hidden service elevator in the basement is secure. Stay intensely curious, stay a little bit paranoid, and join us next time as we continue to unpack the complex, invisible systems that run our modern world. Keep diving deep.